Have you ever felt so overwhelmed that you just shut down? Or like everything builds up until you explode, and then afterwards you don't even know why? Or have you ever felt completely exhausted even when you haven't really done anything? Like no matter how hard you try, you just can't keep up anymore. What I just described are shutdowns, meltdowns, and burnouts. If you have experienced any of those, this episode will be about what they are, misconceptions, and how to handle them. Welcome to episode 5 of Minds That Think Differently. I am your host, Amanda. For accessibility, I'll give a short visual description myself. I'm 16 years old, I have brown shoulder-length hair, and today I am wearing a red and white striped t-shirt. Today I will be talking about burnouts, shutdowns, and meltdowns, and why they matter. I just want to note that I am not a medical professional, and I do make mistakes, so if I ever make a mistake, please let me know. If you have stories, questions, or would like to be on the podcast, please email connect@thinkdifferentpod.com. And for transcripts and more information about my podcast, please visit my website, thinkdifferentpod.com, which will be linked in the episode description. Since this episode is releasing during Disability Pride Month, I want to take a moment to acknowledge what that means. Disability Pride Month is about recognizing disability as a natural part of human diversity and advocating for a world where disabled people are accepted, accommodated, and valued. That also means recognizing experiences like burnout, meltdowns, and shutdowns without shame. These are not personal failures or signs that someone is broken. They're real experiences that deserve understanding, support, and compassion. And I hope this episode helps us move one step closer to that understanding. And with that, let's get started. Before we get into the main topic, I want to start with a question from the mailbox. Today's question is, what's the difference between a meltdown and a tantrum? That's a really important question because people often don't understand the difference between them and think that they are the same thing. But in reality, they are different. A tantrum is goal-oriented. It's a way of expressing frustration to try and get something like attention, a toy, or control over the situation. And typically, if that goal is met or the situation changes, the tantrum will stop. A meltdown is completely different. A meltdown is not a choice, and it's not about getting something. It's a neurological response to being overwhelmed. It happens when the brain and body have taken in more stress, sensory input, or emotional pressure than they can handle. During a meltdown, a person isn't trying to manipulate a situation. They're trying to survive it. And this is where a lot of harm can happen. When people mistake a meltdown for a tantrum, they might respond with punishment, frustration, or telling the person to just calm down. This is something I have experienced myself from both my parents and others around me. But in that moment, the person doesn't have the ability to just stop. Their nervous system is overloaded. What actually helps during a meltdown is reducing input, things like lowering noise, giving space, or just staying calm and supportive. So if you take one thing away from this, let it be this. A tantrum is about control. A meltdown is about overwhelm. And understanding that difference is really important for how we support people and how we understand ourselves. And that actually leads perfectly into what we're going to be talking about today. Today I will be talking about a topic that is quite stigmatized, and that is burnouts, meltdowns, and shutdowns. I did cover these a bit in my other episodes, but I want to go more in depth on the experiences and the effects of them in this episode. I want to start with an experience that is more internalized and is harder to see from the outside, and that is a shutdown. A shutdown is basically something that your brain and body does to protect itself from overwhelming stimuli by shutting down. Shutdowns could look like being more withdrawn, being unresponsive, or zoning out frequently. Shutdowns are often quiet, internal, and invisible to everyone except the person experiencing them. Now, the key thing to understand is that even though someone may appear as if they are fine during a shutdown, they often are not. Shutdowns can happen due to overstimulation or extreme stimuli. Shutdowns are also not laziness, rudeness, or disinterest. They are a nervous system in protection mode. Shutdowns can feel like, I'm here, but not really. I know people are talking to me, but I can't respond. Or it's like my brain has gone blank. Shutdowns are something that I personally experience a lot, especially in school. I don't want people to see that I'm having a problem because, like I said in my masking episode, I still have that subconscious fear of being judged. For me, during a shutdown, I do experience that I'm here but not really feeling, which is really hard to describe. I don't think that most people can tell I'm having a shutdown unless I communicate beforehand. To most people, it probably just looks like I was mad at something or just being quiet, but I was actually having a shutdown. People likely often misread my shutdowns as me being cold, disinterested, or passive-aggressive. And that can be hard because I think that might make me seem like not an approachable person. Shutdowns are personal to everyone, though, and everyone will experience shutdowns in unique ways. Some ways you can predict shutdowns is if you're feeling distant, your thinking is slower, confusion, losing words, heavy body, or if you just feel like I can't answer that, or if you just know that there's been a lot of sensory input. Next, I want to talk about meltdowns. These are very stigmatized because to people on the outside, it can look childish and like a temper tantrum. However, that's not what it is. Meltdowns are in response to overwhelming stimuli and are a desperate call for help. It is important not to dismiss a meltdown as being overdramatic or childish because then you are dismissing that call for help. Meltdowns are usually impossible to stop once they get going and can vary in intensity. Meltdowns can be a way for neurodivergent people to release pent-up frustration and help them process or express their emotions. All neurotypes can experience meltdowns, not just autistic or ADHD meltdowns. Sensory meltdowns happen when there is too much external stimuli for the person to process at once. Meltdowns can look like crying, screaming, intense stimming, or throwing objects. I want to talk about meltdowns later in life as a teenager or an adult. You're not alone, and it's okay to have meltdowns. Neurodivergent meltdowns in adults happen more frequently than the general public might believe. The difference with meltdowns later in life is shame. When you had a meltdown as a kid, people assumed you were having a tantrum, and often people punished or shamed us. Throughout life, those thoughts are continued, so when you melt down later in life, you can feel a deep shame for losing control or acting childish. This can lead to a shame spiral, which is where you can't escape negative thoughts, leading to them stacking and becoming very toxic. There's also not that much information on meltdowns for adults. While we can't stop meltdowns, we can learn our triggers and learn self-care for during and after a meltdown. To avoid a meltdown, you can identify your triggers. What causes you to have a meltdown? Is it stress, sensory stimulation, the environment, the people around you? During a meltdown, you can use headphones, grounding techniques, use your sensory bag or emergency kit, and remember to be kind to yourself during a meltdown. If there is someone who knows what you're going through, you can seek help from them as well. After a meltdown, rest is important. Take some time off or sleep. Reduce the emotional charge. Talk to someone about what happened, write it out in a journal, or make some art. If you witness someone having a meltdown, what you do can influence the duration and intensity. If you see someone having a meltdown, your goal is to reduce the overwhelming stimuli, not to reason or discipline. The first step is to ensure safety in a quiet, calm manner. Help guide the person to a less stimulating environment if possible, lower the lights, reduce noise, and create physical space around them. Do not touch or crowd them without permission because this can feel threatening. Then practice silent, non-judgmental presence. Don't ask questions, give instructions, or try to talk them out of how they feel. Your quiet, calm, and patient presence communicates safety more than words can. Simply being there without demand is a powerful form of support. After the meltdown has finished, offer unconditional support. Offer a glass of water, a blanket, or a kind word. Do not demand an explanation or a lecture about what happened. Later, when everyone is regulated, you can have a collaborative conversation about triggers and support needs. Your compassionate response can help build trust and mitigate the shame that often follows these meltdowns. Remember that meltdowns are not the same as a temper tantrum. It is not bad behavior. When a person is overwhelmed, that is what results in a meltdown. It is a loss of control. Also remember that not all neurodivergent people experience both meltdowns and shutdowns, but some experience both. I often experience shutdowns due to the buildup of sensory overload throughout the day instead of meltdowns, and I often experience meltdowns when routines change, when there's a lot of unexpected sensory input, or from stress. Everyone has their own triggers, but identifying what triggers meltdowns and shutdowns can help you be more prepared for them and allow you to communicate with others around you about what will happen before it happens. Before we continue, let's take a short sensory break. But this one is going to look a little different. Instead of focusing on grounding or on your body, I want you to take a moment to do nothing. No fixing how you feel. No trying to focus harder. No pushing through. Just pause. If you've been listening and thinking, I need to keep going, or I should be doing something, this is your reminder that you don't need to. You're allowed to rest, even for a few seconds. Maybe that means leaning back in your chair, closing your eyes for a moment, or just letting your mind wander without trying to control it. There's no right way to take this break. And if your brain feels foggy, tired, or overwhelmed right now, that makes sense. That's actually what we've been talking about. So instead of pushing past it, just sit with it for a moment. I'll be right here when you're ready to continue. Next, I want to talk about burnout. You don't have to have a lot of stress in your life to experience burnout. Sometimes just existing in a world that wasn't built for you is exhausting enough. Neurodivergent burnout goes beyond just being tired. It's what happens when constant masking, executive dysfunction, sensory overload, and unrealistic expectations drain every last ounce of energy. Now, in episode 4, I talked about burnout in the context of autism and ADHD. But for those with OCD, anxiety, depression, those who are twice exceptional, and other neurodivergent people, all experience burnout in unique ways. If you're wondering why you can't just push through anymore, the truth is you shouldn't have to. Burnout can affect anyone at any stage of life who was never given the tools to support their unique way of thinking and taking in the world. It's not just about workload. It's about the constant effort of navigating executive function tasks, social norms, masking struggles, and keeping up with neurotypical expectations. So now let's define neurodivergent burnout. It is a deep, pervasive exhaustion caused by the constant need to mask, adapt, or compensate for a neurotypical world that often fails to accommodate unique challenges. It's not just about feeling tired. Burnout impacts executive functioning, emotional exhaustion, and the ability to manage daily tasks. The risk of burnout increases when social expectations, chronic life stress, and sensory overload become too much to manage. Burnout happens when the level of stress outweighs the ability to recover. Without a support network, it's easy to fall into cycles of self-blame, overwork, and eventual collapse. Burnout doesn't look the same for everyone. How it manifests depends on your unique neurotype. Some may experience executive dysfunction and shutdowns, while others may struggle with sensory overload, perfectionism, or chronic hypervigilance. ADHD burnout is usually tied to executive function skills, dopamine depletion, and the struggle to regulate energy levels. Symptoms of ADHD burnout include mental fatigue, difficulty maintaining daily routines, and emotional exhaustion. The cycle of hyperfocus followed by complete shutdown makes it difficult to recover, leading to chronic exhaustion and a loss of motivation. ADHD burnout can look like feeling stuck in task paralysis, relying on urgency and adrenaline, or executive function, making even simple tasks feel impossible. What helps ADHD burnout? Breaking tasks into dopamine-friendly, smaller steps, using body doubling, which is something I talked about in the last episode, for accountability, reducing self-blame for inconsistent energy, and providing sensory-friendly environments to support focus. Autistic burnout is often caused by sensory overload, social expectations, and the ongoing effort to mask in a neurotypical world. It can look like loss of speech or executive function, heightened sensory input and sensitivity, increased meltdowns or shutdowns in response to overwhelming stressors, and losing the ability to function in work, social situations, or self-care. What can help autistic burnout? Creating sensory-friendly environments through noise-canceling headphones, weighted blankets, and dim lighting. Taking unmasking time to be your authentic self, setting boundaries around social demands and expectations, and building routines that honor natural energy levels rather than forcing neurotypical schedules. Dyslexic burnout comes from stress caused by reading and writing demands in a work environment that doesn't accommodate your needs. It can look like slow processing speed and frustration with literacy-heavy tasks, avoidance of reading heavy work even when previously enjoyable, and feeling constantly behind due to extra time needed for written communication. What helps is using text-to-speech or audiobooks to reduce cognitive load, prioritizing verbal communication when possible, and allowing extra time for tasks without internalized shame. Anxiety burnout can be caused by always living in a constant state of hypervigilance. The brain and body are always on high alert, scanning for potential threats, overanalyzing social situations, and anticipating the worst-case scenario. The brain constantly being in a fight or flight mode is what leads to burnout. It can look like mental exhaustion from overanalyzing decisions and social interactions, chronic muscle tension, headaches, and digestive issues from prolonged stress, feeling too drained to be productive but too anxious to relax, or difficulty resting even when completely exhausted due to persistent worry. What helps with anxiety burnout is practicing breathwork and body-based regulation techniques, setting clear boundaries around social demands and overstimulation, and prioritizing professional help and building a support network. OCD burnout comes from intrusive thoughts leading to an exhausting cycle of compulsions, overanalysis, and self-doubt. The pressure to meet social expectations increases the risk of burnout, and when exhaustion sets in, compulsions may intensify as an attempt to regain control, further feeding the burnout loop. OCD burnout can look like feeling out of control when routines and rituals no longer provide relief, perfectionism leading to analysis paralysis, making decision-making overwhelming, and intrusive thoughts becoming more frequent and harder to ignore due to mental fatigue. What helps OCD burnout is gentle exposure therapy, recognizing that good enough is better than perfection, developing low-energy coping mechanisms, and seeking professional help from a therapist that specializes in OCD and burnout recovery. Depression burnout mimics and intensifies depressive symptoms. This can look like social withdrawal, disrupted sleep, and a loss of interest in previously enjoyable activities. It can look like complete lack of motivation, emotional numbness, feeling disconnected from interests, goals, and relationships, feeling like everything is too much effort, leading to withdrawal from responsibilities. What helps is lowering expectations, creating low-energy support systems, breaking isolation in tiny ways, and seeking professional help. Twice exceptional burnout is unique because your high intellectual capacity often masks your struggles with executive dysfunction, emotional regulation, and social norms, and you are left without support. It can look like intellectual exhaustion from high expectations and constant overachievement, losing passion for interests due to the pressure to perform at a high level, and procrastination due to the fear of failure. What helps is reframing success from always excelling to sustainable growth, practicing self-compassion when motivation fluctuates, and seeking supportive environments where giftedness doesn't come with unrealistic expectations. So I am actually twice exceptional myself, and I'm going through twice exceptional burnout. I do really well in school, and everyone always expects me to be good at everything, and everyone thinks I'm so smart. And when I struggle with things, I feel like I can't ask for help, because I shouldn't need help since I'm so smart. I put so much value in perfectionism, and I feel like even getting a B+ is failing. This is something I'm currently working on in therapy, trying to reframe that grades don't define who I am, and they are not a measure of my success. But for me, it's very hard to separate the two. Throughout my life, I've been praised for being smart and doing well in school, and my autistic black and white all or nothing thinking has now turned grades into an A as the only measure of success. It feels like if I don't get all A's, people won't see anything in me. For me, burnout has looked like imposter syndrome, a loss of identity and self-worth, but remember that it looks different for everyone. Overall, in neurodivergent burnout, remember that you are not alone. Recovery requires self-compassion, accommodations, and a shift in how we define success. The more we name and recognize neurodivergent burnout, the better we can build systems that allow us to survive. Now that I've gone over the different types of burnout, I want you to think if you've ever experienced any of these types of burnout and haven't known it. And also, what does burnout look like for you? I want to leave you with some closing thoughts. The next time you find yourself shutting down, burning out, or on the edge of a meltdown, I want you to remember that you are not broken. You are overwhelmed and your brain is trying to protect you. You're not the only one who experiences this, even if it feels like it sometimes. If this episode resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear this too. You never know who might be struggling silently. Now I will do a short recap of everything I discussed in this episode. First, I talked about shutdowns and how even though someone may look fine on the outside, they may not be fine on the inside. Then I talked about meltdowns and how they're commonly viewed as temper tantrums, but they are completely different things. Then I ended with burnout, the different types of burnout, what they can look like, and how to support each type. Then I will end with an affirmation. The affirmation for this episode is, my mind and body are not failing me. They are trying to protect me. And the question for this episode is, what are the signs your body gives you before you reach your limit, and are you noticing them? You can think about this on your own or email your response. I may feature it in a future episode. In the next episode, I will be discussing lesser-known neurodivergent identities. If you enjoyed this episode, please let me know and follow on your favorite podcast platform and share with someone who might be interested or benefit from it. Thank you for listening to Minds That Think Differently, and I'll see you next time.